So this is what we're going to learn how to make today. And I'm going to show you one way, but you can definitely take this craft project into your own directions. So this one here, this torn up teacup, is about a card size. And it's done in a style I call dry collage. So we will need matte medium for our work, as I mentioned in the kit list, but the matte medium is to create the teacup, but not to actually fuse the pieces together. I have done both kinds where I've used the wet medium and the dry medium, and I just find that the dry medium lends itself better to teaching, easier to reuse things if you're not happy with your finished product. And then you can always switch it up and go with a more permanent wet medium of collaging everything down with matte medium. But this is what we're going to do today. So this size here is roughly about a card size. And we're also going to work on some that are perfect for framing and giving away as gifts. So what you will need for the class, for sure, you need some watercolor paper. I prefer 140 pound hot press, but cold press such as this one is fine too. 9 by 12 inch, because we're going to split it in half and you'll get 2 pieces out of 1 piece of paper. Or if you were to tear a 9 by 12 into 4, you could have 4 beautiful 4 by 6 inch card faces. So you will need some watercolor paper. Definitely get yourself a favorite metallic gold paint pen. The Decocolor Premium is definitely a crowd favorite, but I have found the Craft Smart chisel tip is nice as well. And if we're going to go over top of stuff with matte medium, in some cases it will dull down the sheen, so the shinier the better. You're going to want to hit your dollar store and grab yourself some fun doilies. They come in small packs, lots of sizes available. A lot of times there's more than one. Just make sure you take a minute to actually split your doilies up. When they come out of the package, they are usually pretty firmly stuck together, and I wasn't aware and started painting on a couple, and then afterwards it's like, ooh. So pre-pull apart. You want some doilies. Then you're going to want to get yourself some tissue paper. If you're a friend of mine from the Insider Studio, you may have quite a bit of lovely collage fodder. I know I was recently gifted some in a rack. So tissue paper. If you wanted to go that extra mile, as I mentioned in my Instagram, pick yourself up some rice paper. You can find it in lino cut kits. Search up block printing. It's pretty common product. You could use the non-wax deli paper that is often used in collage as well if you want. If you can't get your hands on this, or are not confident, or don't want to do it and want to use tissue paper, that's totally fine. I just thought if there's my artists out there that are really interested in making this teacup 100% their own, then get yourself some rice paper, because you can definitely do some printing and stenciling on there to create your own design for your teacup. Now, to create the layers, here what you're seeing is a mix of acrylic and watercolor. I did a watercolor striped wash background, and then the details on the teacups. This was acrylic ink, and this is acrylic paint and gold paint pen. So as far as media goes for the class, you will need some acrylic. You can use watercolor, but I would definitely suggest starting with acrylic, especially if you're not 100% sure how you're going to layer things together. Watercolor can move. I'm fairly versatile in my watercolor paint, so I don't mind mixing it with acrylic. I kind of know how to layer without any issues happening. And then if you can get yourself some neocolor aquarelle crayons. They are a permanent non-wax, non-oil based crayon that do lovely detail work on the end of the cards. But that is entirely optional. If you can't get your hands on this, you can definitely use chalk pastel. You can definitely just break out your bin of paint pens. Like, anything you don't have for this class is not necessarily essential, except for the watercolor paper. You kind of need watercolor paper, but it doesn't have to even be fresh watercolor paper. If you have yourself a handy dandy stash of chaos layers or morgue pile pieces, those will work equally well. So the first thing we're going to want to do when we sit and we kind of take a look at the torn up teacups I've kind of created here for our class is kind of decide what order we want to create in. So if you already have tissue paper in mind, you're good to go. We're going to start. I'm going to show you how to create some stamps and some fun on your rice paper, and then you will have your own tissue paper to apply to the watercolor paper. So here I just have a sheet of rice paper straight out of the packet. I have a gold paint pen striped line on there already. So the one thing with rice paper that you need to be aware of as you get going on your design ideas is that it turns translucent when matte medium is added to it. So if you see in this one here, this is actually paint pen on rice paper that's been collaged onto a fairly dramatic chaos layer. So the reason for this is that I love this fluty kind of ruffled edge that you get from tearing paper, and I love the look of a bit of texture that the rice paper gives to the front of this. So it really calls to mind for me kind of that porcelain-esque tea finish. So if you don't want to do this layer, you don't have to. You could totally just take a chaos layer, and I will show you how to do that, or a piece of old art that you're not using, tear that straight up and use that straight away. But I wanted to add this little extra step just so everybody could know that they could really make this class 100% their own. So when you do this, it is not enough, unless you're just going to do it, say, straight white on a white paper, to just do gold paint pen decorations, because as soon as you press that onto your white paper, let's say, this one here is white, the paper itself disappears and you're left with the marks. But if it's white on white, it just looks like muted gold stripes on a piece of paper. So you do need to kind of add some color to your rice paper, just to keep it visible once you use it in your collage medium. Now, for today, I have chosen primarily blues and yellows as my colors. I do have a background here, a fuchsia pink, that's just watercolor, but for the sake of class, we're just going to show you how to do it in one way, and you can mix it up. So, some options, if you're interested, grab yourself some stencils or stamps, or you can create some on a potato, simple shapes, or you can just spatter. I mean, sky's the limit with what you want to do here. But just in case you're stumped, I'm going to show you some quick ideas on how to add some drama to your tissue paper. So one thing I'm going to strenuously remind you to be careful of, if you're going to use acrylic paint or anything on this, you could even just draw on these in colored paint pen, and that would be great too, and then go over top and you'd have a really unique kind of teacup layer piece. But just watch how much water you're using. I have a tiny little bit on here because, like I said, the rice paper is very easy, dissolves in water pretty quickly. It still holds its paper shape, but you can lose quite a bit if you overdo your water mixture. So drier is better. And if you get a little thick, skin of a paint on there, that's fine. Absolutely do not worry. It doesn't have to be flush or super smooth. It just has to be a print. So I'm going to keep that stencil there just for a second. I'm going to work off some of the color on the side there. So just have some fun thinking about teacups. If you want to keep it super on track, so to speak, with the whole teacup idea, remember teacups often have patterns because they're not so much hand painted anymore, although there is still definitely that, and that itself is an amazing, feat to keep things looking the same. But patterns, right? So on your sheets, whatever direction you want to go, give some thought to keeping it rhythmic, ABA patterns like you learned in school as you go along. Now, if you're using straight up tissue paper, most often than not, it is created in patterns anyway. So for example, this is a gift I got at Christmas, so I love to hang on to my tissue paper. You could paint on top of this as well. So like sky's the limit when it comes to creating this stage. Here I've done, this was a gel stamp, and I used acrylic ink, and I just pressed the stamp and then went on the paper, and the same for the leaves. So it's all done in acrylic ink. That way when I go over top of it with matte medium, it's not like watercolor, it won't budge. It's permanent. So this is one of my favorites, and you can see how that popped up in here really beautifully. All right, so the method to the madness there. And if you're a big fan of like the blue and white china teacups, then just grab yourself a royal blue or, oh no, my brain's blanking on my favorite color. There's a blue I really love, but go ahead and get that in there and then let it dry. It doesn't take very long and it works beautifully. All right, so that turned out really pretty, that beautiful little stencil there. So definitely, this is where you make the class your own. Get stencils, get your favorite mark making tools, and fill up your rice paper full of those shapes. And then you need to grab your doilies. Now, again, it's an optional piece for this class. If you can't get your hands on any of these, don't freak out. You can definitely make a circular saucer shape out of another chaos layer. We're going to talk about patterns and colors as we start building our pieces. So for now, this is the fun stage. If you don't have a lot of art that you can reuse, and then this is the stuff you want to do first, is just sort of create some fun, juicy underlayers for your pieces. So these are the saucers, and that is what we'll paint right now. I definitely recommend starting with, if you're going to make everything from scratch like I'm showing you here. I have the blue and yellow, but you could add a third color in there and get some pink, and then just keep everything that isn't a teacup more of a solid color. You don't have to, absolutely feel free to break the rules. You will find awesome results, but just to keep it, you can get lots of ideas and get carried away with this class because there's just so much it creates. But yeah, just to build it with a, one way first. We're gonna do, in this case, the background is still one solid color. The teacup is where we're gonna have the most drama, and then we're gonna have a little bit of extra fun drama in the saucer shape, but we will keep it primarily one color. That way, everything stands out as a unique piece. I found if there was too much activity in each of the layers, that it was difficult to actually find the teacup in it. So I had to kind of think of how best to compose them. So having said that, you just have to remember to keep it mixed up. So you could do a very chaotic background, a very chaotic, sort of mid-chaotic saucer, and your teacup could be one color, and that would have a lot of impact. So you can still play with what gets what treatment, what is striped, what is one color, what is mid-range, but you can flip in which order, right? You could have the saucer be the dramatic piece and then have a wash on the cup and more pattern in the background. Definitely feel free to explore all the various ways, but today we're just going to start with these ones where we have a very simple background. The teacup is where the action is, and the saucer definitely has drama, but it's to support the teacup. So these doilies, I'm just going to do some fun blue and yellow on, and then I will let them dry. So we've got our tissue paper painted. We're doing the saucers for underneath our teacups, and then the next step I'm going to show you is to create the chaos layer that we will tear into our cups, the torn up teacup. Again, all of these stages are optional. If you're a very creative person, I'm pretty sure you've already blown past them and know there's lots of different things you can already do to make it your own. But I would love for you to try it this way too, and then tag me on Instagram at Maya Paints and use the hashtag #TornUpTeacups and have some fun along together. All right, so you want to let these dry. There we go. You can do a lot more. You could spatter, you could go rainbow, you could do a rainbow mandala right in the middle. Like, now I have more ideas. This is what I mean. Just see it through once because you're gonna have a lot of ideas.